Crying mother gorilla hands her albino baby to Ranger. What happened next shocked everyone. The jungle was still save for the faint rustling of leaves in the humid air. The sounds of distant birds and insects filled the atmosphere, but there was something else, an unmistakable cry, soft and desperate. A mother gorilla, her large dark eyes wide with distress, stood near the edge of a small clearing. Her body trembled as she cradled something in her arms, a small figure pressed close to her chest. The ranger, trained to blend into the forest, paused and listened. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the cry, low, mournful, a sound of pure worry. He moved quietly, slipping between the trees, his gaze fixed on the gorilla and her baby. As he drew closer, he saw the unusual figure she held in her arms. The baby was an albino. His fur, a soft and fragile white, contrasted sharply against the mother's dark, rugged coat. He appeared small, vulnerable, almost ghost-like in the deep shadows of the jungle. His eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling slowly, too slowly. The sun filtered through the canopy above, casting fleeting shadows across his fragile form, highlighting his vulnerability. The mother shifted, her trembling hands carefully adjusting the baby in her arms. She glanced around, her gaze sweeping the dense forest before returning to the baby, her soft whimpering increasing in volume. There was an urgency in her movements, as if she knew something was wrong, but didn't know how to fix it. Her baby's skin looked raw, patches of it cracked and peeling, a stark contrast to the otherwise smooth and rich skin of a normal gorilla infant. It was clear that something was deeply wrong. His health seemed fragile, and the mother, once full of strength, now appeared uncertain, helpless. The ranger observed from a distance, his instincts kicking in. He had seen many gorillas in the wild, had watched mothers care for their young in the most remarkable ways. But this was different. The mother seemed to be reaching out in a way that was almost human. Her soft, pitiful sounds, her eyes filled with an understanding that something needed to be done. Then, as if guided by some unspoken bond, the mother did something unexpected. She stepped forward, her large frame moving hesitantly towards the ranger. She stopped just within a few feet of him, her body language calm but pleading, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that caught him off guard. Without a sound, the mother gently placed the baby down onto the soft, damp ground at his feet. The ranger's breath caught in his throat. The baby, small and fragile, lay motionless. The mother remained close, standing by, her eyes never leaving the ranger. She was not aggressive, nor did she seem frightened. There was only a quiet, intense trust, an understanding that the ranger might be the one who could help her baby. The moment stretched out, the weight of it settling over the ranger like a thick fog. He crouched down slowly, his heart heavy with the realization of what was happening. He whispered softly, "I'll try." His voice barely disturbed the stillness of the jungle. He reached out carefully, his hands shaking slightly as they hovered over the fragile baby. The mother watched, her eyes filled with a quiet, unspoken plea. She had entrusted her baby to him, a silent cry for help that carried the weight of a mother's love and hope. The ranger knelt down, his hands trembling as he reached out to the baby gorilla. The tiny creature lay still, his pale fur glistening faintly in the filtered sunlight, his breathing shallow and uneven. There was a rawness to the baby's skin, a texture that spoke of neglect and struggle. His tiny chest rose and fell with effort, his limbs limp beside him. The mother stood just a few feet away, watching intently. Her gaze was fixed, unwavering, as if she knew something was about to happen but dared not move. Her large dark eyes held a mixture of hope and fear. Hope that the ranger could do something, and fear that her baby might be beyond help. The ranger gently placed his fingers near the baby's tiny chest, feeling the rhythm of his breathing. It was weak, but there was something, a pulse however faint, that told him the baby was still holding on. With soft hands, he carefully examined the baby's body, noticing the cracked skin and the telltale signs of a condition that left the young gorilla vulnerable to the elements. Albino gorillas were rare, but with their delicate skin and sight challenges, they were even more prone to injury and illness. This baby had likely been struggling since birth. He glanced up at the mother. Her stance remained steady, her eyes still watching, but she made no move to interfere. There was no aggression, no sign of territorial protectiveness. Instead, there was a quiet trust in her movements, a belief that the ranger somehow could offer salvation. The ranger took a deep breath, his mind focused on the task at hand. He needed to act quickly. With careful hands, he lifted the baby, cradling him gently as he checked for any obvious signs of dehydration or injury. The baby made a soft, faint sound, barely a whimper, but it was enough to stir something deep within the ranger's chest. The baby was alive, still fighting to survive. He began to carefully clean the baby's wounds, using water from his pack to moisten a cloth. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, and the sound of distant animal calls filled the silence. The ranger worked with the precision of someone who had been trained to handle wildlife in need, but even he could feel the weight of the moment pressing against him. It wasn't just the baby's survival he was concerned about. It was the unspoken connection between mother and child that he could feel in the air. It was as if the entire jungle was holding its breath. The baby's skin began to look less dry as the water seeped into his fragile body. With each touch, the ranger could feel the tiny form grow ever so slightly stronger. But there was no time to waste. The baby needed nourishment. He reached for the bottle of formula, gently feeding the tiny gorilla, who hesitated at first but slowly took the liquid. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him a bit of strength. The mother, still silent, watched every movement. She did not approach, but her posture softened, her body no longer tense. The worry in her eyes gave way to something else, perhaps trust, perhaps relief. Though it was impossible to know for sure, the baby began to stir more, his limbs twitching as the formula seemed to give him some comfort. Slowly, the gorilla's breathing steadied, the ragged gasps becoming less frequent. He let out a weak, almost inaudible cry as though testing his own voice, but it was a sound of life, a sound that reassured the ranger that he hadn't lost him yet. Minutes passed in quiet anticipation. The mother, still standing close, now seemed a little more relaxed, though her gaze remained on her baby. It was clear that she wasn't ready to leave him, but her decision to let the ranger intervene was the first step toward a difficult road of recovery. The ranger could feel the weight of the situation settling into his chest. He had done what he could for now, but it would take much more than this to ensure the baby's survival. But in this moment, he allowed himself to feel a quiet, cautious hope. The tiny gorilla was still alive, and that was a victory, small but significant. He carefully placed the baby back into the mother's arms, his heart heavy with the responsibility of what lay ahead. The mother accepted him without hesitation, pulling him close, her large hands gently cradling him once more. Her eyes never left the ranger, as if to say thank you, though the words went unspoken. And in that silent exchange, the ranger knew one thing for certain. He would continue to fight for this baby's life as long as there was hope. Days passed and the baby gorilla grew stronger. His pale fur began to shine again, and his once weak limbs now wiggled with life. Each visit from the ranger brought small signs of improvement, and the mother, though still cautious, allowed him closer. She had learned to trust, though silently, and her eyes no longer showed desperation but a quiet hope. One morning, the ranger approached to find the baby sitting up, his small hands reaching out toward him. It was the first real sign of acknowledgement. The mother, standing nearby, nudged her baby gently toward the ranger, an unspoken permission. The bond between them had quietly shifted. As the ranger reached out to touch the baby, the mother didn't flinch. Instead, she watched calmly, her protective instincts still there but no longer tense. The baby made a small sound, content, as the ranger's fingers brushed over his fragile fur. There was no fear, no hesitance. It was a moment of quiet connection. The ranger knew that while the baby was not yet fully healed, he was no longer in danger. The mother, her strength returning, held her baby close, her low rumble filling the air as she nuzzled him gently. As the ranger stood to leave, he gave them one last look. They were no longer the fragile creatures they had once been. The road to full recovery was still ahead, but in that quiet moment, the future seemed a little brighter. The jungle, once silent with uncertainty, now hummed with promise.